I have this pimple right here that I put a pimple patch on, and it popped and made it worse. And I'm actually so disappointed, because now it's just a big red spot on my face. And it's probably making me want to cry a little bit, but we're running with it. So, I'll live, I guess. Hi guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel, Sup Sluts. Today I'm going to be doing my little January recap, because I read 6 and counting books this month, and I wanted to do a little recap. The first book that I read this month was this one. It was called I'm Thinking of Ending Things by Ian Reid. I think that's how you pronounce that. I rated this book 1 star. It was basically, the plot of this book is about this girl and this guy, and they're going to go meet his parents, and she's thinking of, like, ending the relationship. And basically, oh, I should have said, there's going to be spoilers in here, so click away right now if you don't want spoilers. But basically, the whole plot of this book is that it's all actually in his head, and none of this is actually happening. And he's basically this janitor out of school who met the girl at a trivia night, but, like, never actually talked to her, and then concocted this whole thing in his head where he, like, took her to meet his parents, and then you find out that his parents have been dead for years, and that, like, he's crazy, and then he kills himself in the end. And, I had to look up that ending because I didn't understand. I was really confused. I was like, what is happening the entire time I was reading this book? 90% of this book was also just, like, inner dialogue, and I found that incredibly boring. Okay, please, cut. I thought it was boring. Like, there was nothing good about this book. There was barely any plot, and what plot was there was really confusing in my opinion. I had to look up the ending because I could not tell what was happening the entire time I read this book. Other than talking with the parents, there was, like, no dialogue, and I just found that so boring because there's nothing worse than reading a book and the entire thing is inner monologues. Like, I feel like dialogue helps break up books, but this had none. And I thought it was really boring, and I didn't like it. I didn't think it was a thriller. It didn't have me on the edge of my seat. It, like, wasn't interesting. I heard a lot of good things about it, and to me, it just didn't hit. I've read things that actually freaked me out to the point where, like, I could not sleep, and this just wasn't one of them. So, I rated it 1 star. Next thing that I read the entire A Good Girl's Guide to Murder series. I read all 4 books. I'm going to rate them individually, but I did rate the entire series like a 4, because we'll get into it. Okay, so the first one is A Good Girl's Guide to Murder, obviously. I rated this one a 5 out of 5 because I absolutely loved this book. Basically, what the plot is it's this girl named Pip, and she's doing her senior capstone project. And, basically, for her project, she's going to go into this murder case that happened in her town 5 years ago, where this girl, Andy Bell, was murdered, and nobody knew, like, what happened, and then a couple days later, her boyfriend killed himself, and they just assumed the boyfriend was the killer. But Pip never believed that he was guilty, so she goes in her project to try and figure out what really happened, and throughout the story, she, teams up with Sal, Andy's boyfriend, who was the killer. His older brother, Ravi, they team up and decide to solve the murder and figure out, like, what really happened. And the plot twist was so crazy. Basically, what really happened was Andy Bell was, like, not this good girl that everyone thought she was. She was not this, like, popular, really nice, good person. She actually was a really bad person. She was a drug dealer, and she was, like, really mean to a lot of people. She bullied people. Like, she was not a good person. And while she was doing all of this, she was also sleeping with her teacher. And the teacher was being threatened by Andy, and Andy was being like, oh, I'm gonna, like, expose our secret. Like, I'm gonna tell everybody. And he didn't want that to happen, so one night when Andy went to his house and was like, I'm gonna tell everybody, he hit her over the head with, something, and she, like, got unconscious. Not unconscious, she got, like, a concussion. And then she walked away and left the house and went back to her house and, saw her younger sister there. And basically, her younger sister had been R-worded at a party. The person that R-worded her got the drugs to, like, knock her out from Andy. And Andy had, like, no remorse for her sister. And so, basically, her sister and then Andy started, like, convulsing and choking on her own vomit, and her sister let her die because she was angry, and that's kind of what happened. And oh god, this book was so good. I really, really loved it. I think the plot was so interesting. I thought it was really, really cool how it was, like, a girl solving a murder. Like, that was so cool. I love the way that the plot developed, too. Like, how each time she got a new piece of evidence, you could see it. This is the way they did the interviews, so you could kind of see it like it is an actual interview. And I really, really liked that because I thought it was so interesting because you could really see everything in, like, real time. Like, this is her little, like, board of ideas. And I just really liked that because it really allowed the reader to get a chance to also try and solve the murder and, like, figure out what was really happening. And I just thought that was really cool, and I really, really liked it. There were a couple other things that happened in the book that I'm not going to, like, spoil everything. But I spoiled, like, the big part, but it doesn't matter. I'm not going to talk about every minor detail of this book. But I actually really did like it. I thought it was really cute. And, I don't know. I really, really liked it. I thought it was super cool. I thought it was super cute. And I think it was really interesting the way it was done. And so I rated it a 5 out of 5. I love Holly Jackson. So I figured I was going to rate it a 5 out of 5. Earlier last year, I read Five Survive, which is one of her books. And that book was so good. I knew that these ones were going to be really good. Next, I read the second series in the book, Good Girl, Bad Blood, and this one was super good. Basically, it takes place a couple months after the first book, and now she made a podcast called A Good Girl's Guide to Murder podcast, basically explaining the whole case and, like, everything that happened. And in the last book, there was, like, this big thing that happened. A bunch of people got arrested in the end, and one of the people was Max Hastings, the guy who was drugging girls at parties. And throughout this book, you got to see his trial, which I really liked, because I liked how much it really tied into the first book. But basically, the plot of this book is that now somebody in their town has gone missing. One of Pip's close friend, Connor, his older brother, Jamie, went missing. And so Connor enlists Pip's help to try and figure out, like, what happened to Jamie. And basically, the whole story is, like, going through his final days that, like, people saw him and figuring out where he was and what he was doing. And I'm trying to, like, see if there was, like, evidence pieces that I could pull or something. And I really, really liked it. I thought it was really interesting. There were so many different things that happened, too, throughout the book. Like, it didn't just follow Jamie. We were also seeing the further part of Pip and Robbie's relationship, which I loved so much. I love Pip and Robbie. They were just I keep saying Robbie. They were really cute together. I really loved them together. So getting to see them in this book be a couple was really, really exciting for me. I loved that. But basically, what happened with Jamie was they went to this memorial party for Sal and Andy. And they were at the memorial, and then Jamie, like, disappeared, and nobody saw him after that. Well, basically, what happened was he had been talking to this girl online whose name was Lila. And Lila had told him to do a bunch of illegal things, like break into people's houses and, like, commit crimes and stuff like that, because she was trying to see how far he would really go for her. And basically what Lila wanted him to do was murder somebody. But, okay, so basically what happened was there was this big murderer, like, a few years ago who murdered kids. And he enlisted the help of his son to help, like, commit these murders. He got caught, and the son got put in witness protection. And nobody, like, knew who he was. But he did, like, have a name that he went by, which was kind of, like, similar to his father's serial killer name. And so, basically, this person, who was the brother of the last victim of this serial killer, had been looking for the kid to kill him, or to, like, to kill him. To get rid of him, to, like, avenge his sister. And basically you find out that the guy whose twin sister died from the serial killer, his name was Charlie, and he was Pip's neighbor, and he had moved to their town to try and find the son of the killer and, like, kill him. You find out that the guy from the first book, who is, like, this what was he? He was, like, a newspaper reporter, who, like, wrote this big expose in the first book about how Sal Singh was the killer. It was Andy's killer. Sorry, I feel like I'm not giving the right details and I'm talking all over the place, but whatever. And, we find out that Stanley Forbes, the guy who wrote the expose and was, like, a big kind of character in the first book, ended up being the son of the serial killer. And so Charlie had tried to get Jamie. Charlie was pretending to be Lila Mead and talking to Jamie on the phone and trying to, like, get him to kill Stanley. Sorry, there's too many names. And when that happened, Stanley actually attacked Jamie back and then kidnapped Jamie and locked him in his house. He was really nice kidnapper, though. Like, he was taking care of him, tried to get a mattress in the bathroom and, like, all this stuff, gave him food, whatnot. And so, you know, he was chilling. He was great. And then what ended up happening was Pip had figured all of this out. So she was trying to find Jamie, and she got Connor and Ravi to go to Stanley Forbes' house and get Jamie out while she kind of, like, kept Stanley occupied somewhere else. And she took Stanley to the barn where Becca Bell, Andy Bell's sister who killed her, stashed Andy's body. And basically when that happened, Charlie had followed Pip and Stanley to the barn and ended up shooting Stanley and then lighting the barn on fire. And so Pip was, like, carrying this man as he's, like, dying in her arms. And the book ends with him dying and them having a funeral. But it was kind of sad, actually, because, like, this kid obviously was a little kid when this happened, and everyone's like, oh, he's a murderer, he's awful, but he was, like, a little kid. Like, what was he gonna do? And I really, really liked the way that this story developed. While I did think that this whole subplot of, like, Charlie and Lila and Stanley was a little weird, and I definitely was confused on how we got to this point, I did like it, and I did think it was really interesting. In the end, Jamie ended up being fine and got reunited with his family and everything. But I did like this book. I did think it was really good. I rated it a 5 out of 5 too. It was a really good book, and I really liked the way that it tied in with the first book too. I liked the way that she was figuring all these details out, and I thought it was really interesting. The end did make me really sad though. I was really sad to see Pip, like, so heartbroken about this man. I was so sad that he died. It was really heartbreaking, but I did really like this book, and I thought it was really good, and I feel like I've been talking for 2 hours, so we're gonna move on. The next book that I read was the third book in the Good Girls Guide to Murder series, As Good as Dead, and I have to say, out of the whole series, this one has to be my favorite. This one was absolutely phenomenal. If I could rate something more than 5 stars, I would rate this more than 5 stars. I loved this book. I thought it was so good. Basically, this book takes place a year after the second book, and it follows Pip, who's still kind of traumatized from what happened. She's still, like, not sleeping very well, and she's still, like, hearing the gunshots and still, like, not doing good. So, naturally, she is, taking drugs to help her sleep, because, of course she is. And, basically, it's just kind of following her, like, struggling a little bit at the beginning. Like I said, for the second book, one of the characters, Max Hastings, who was drugging all these girls at the party, his trial was happening in the second book, and he was found not guilty, even though there were recordings and there were testimonies and all this stuff. He was found not guilty. So Pip is still struggling with that. She's struggling with justice and all this because Charlie ended up getting away in the end. And so she's just kind of finding it hard to keep going after all of this has happened to her. Actually, like, plot of this book basically is that Pip keeps getting these emails or these, like, messages or tweets on her account saying, like, who will look for you when you go missing, or something to that effect. And she's getting a little creeped out by it. She's getting a little worried. Sorry, my brain. And basically she's, like, trying to figure out, like, what's going on, and her and Ravi are trying to, like, figure out, like, what's happening. Like, this is weird, because now that she's getting these messages, she's also finding dead pigeons by her house, which seems a little unsuspicious, but they're decapitated, so it's definitely a little suspicious. She's also finding chalk figures by her house. Here are the pictures. You can't really see them that well, but basically there are chalk figures there, and Pip's a little weirded out by this. She's a little creeped out. So her and Ravi are looking into it, and they end up coming across this killer who is so colorfully named the Duct Tape Killer, or the DT Killer. I'm going to refer to him as the Duct Tape Killer, but in the book he's called the DT Killer. Basically, the Duct Tape Killer, obviously he kills his victims, and then he wraps them in duct tape. He wraps their entire face in duct tape, and then he strangles them with, like, blue cord. And when Pip's investigating this, someone's already been, like, caught and is labeled the Duct Tape Killer. But Ravi's like, well, we should look into this. Like, this is a little weird because one of the victims was experienced the same thing. They saw chalk figures and they saw dead pigeons, and they received weird calls, which Pip has now started receiving weird calls. And so then Pip decides to look into it, and she ends up getting the, what's it called? Interview from the police. And basically she finds out that the way that the police conducted this interview was super awful. Like, they were grinding him for hours. They led him to answers and, like, basically forced a confession out of him. And so then she's like, okay, clearly somebody else is this killer, so we're trying to figure it out who it is. And she finds out that the last person killed by the duct tape killer died the same day that Andy Bell died. And so it's all kind of coming full circle. It's coming back around. And so then Pip figures out that the guy who is the duct tape killer, the arrested duct tape killer, worked for Andy Bell's dad's company. His name is Jason Bell, and he ran, I want to say, a construction company. I feel like that's wrong. I don't know what kind of company he ran, but whatever. It doesn't matter. So she tries to talk to him, but, like, Jason hates Pip, basically, because Becca got arrested for killing her sister. His whole family is falling apart, and so he doesn't like her. And so he, like, doesn't tell her anything, and she kind of is just like, okay, well, I guess there's nothing I can really do. And she kind of ends up going down a trail that leads her going to interview one of her friends to kind of figure out what's happening, and before she does, she gets kidnapped by the duct tape killer. Now, major spoiler ahead here, but the duct tape killer is Jason Bell, which I would like to point out that I called, and I have receipts to prove that I called this. I knew it was going to be him, which is one of the things I liked about this series, was how the twists were completely, like, mind-blowing, shocking, but a couple pages before, or a little bit before, if you were really paying attention to the details, you could figure out. And I love mysteries like that, because I think it makes it so much more, like, personal to the reader. You can kind of, like, figure out what's happening, and I love books like that. But anyways, I guess who the duct tape killer was, so I'm basically amazing. But after she's kidnapped, he drives her out to his, like, facility where he, like, runs his company. And while Pip's in the trunk of his car, she's like, I'm gonna leave behind every piece of evidence I can. So she's, like, scratching her head on, like, the seat. She's putting her fingerprints everywhere. She's doing all of this stuff. And basically when he takes her there, he, like, wraps her head in duct tape, obviously. And then he's like, okay, I'm gonna be back and I'll kill you in a little bit. So he leaves, and Pip, being the genius that she is, who has studied true crime cases and has literally solved a murder and a missing persons case, she is trying to escape. And she, like, tries to get a screw out of the shelf that she's currently being, like, handcuffed to. I think it was handcuffed. I'm a little confused on the, like, exact logistics of her escape. But the screw ends up falling out, and, like, she loses it, and she's, like, thinking she's gonna be done. But then she knocks over another storage thing next to her and somehow gets free. I honestly I was a little confused on the way that it was explained, but she gets free. She, like, takes off all the duct tape, and she leaves. And she, like, breaks a window, and she gets out. And she took a hammer with her to kind of, like, keep her safe in case she needed to. And she escaped to the woods, but then Jason Bell came back. And she decided that instead of just letting him go out and be a killer and possibly kill more people or get her again, she kills him back. She beats him to death with a hammer, and Mans is dead. He dies. Then after this, she's, like, freaking out. Like, she just got kidnapped, and now she's just murdered somebody, and she's flipping out. And she calls Ravi, and she decides what she's gonna do. And basically, like the awesome, amazing person that she is, she decides she's gonna pin the whole murder on Max Hastings, the found not guilty R-worder. I'm sorry, I don't know if I can say that on YouTube. I'll put it on the screen, but I don't think I'm allowed to say what that is. But basically, she decides that she's going to, convict him as a murderer. And she does. She concocts this elaborate plan of getting his shoes, getting his hoodie, taking some of his hair. She uses the drug that he used to use on other girls on him, which is very ironic, and knocks him out and basically, like, goes into his house and gets evidence from, like, his stuff, like his shoes and his hoodie and his hair, and all plants it at the crime scene and ends up pinning him for murder. It almost goes downhill when Jason Bell, like the psycho that he is, takes trophies from his victims, and he took Pip's headphones. But Ravi, her boyfriend, decides that he was going to take the fall and be like, oh, well, I must have left him there. Like, it was me. And Pip's freaking out about this. She's like, no, you can't implicate yourself. Because she had a bunch of her friends help out. She had her best friend and her best friend's older sister corroborate her alibi. And she had some of her friends, like, help her plant stuff. And her and Ravi ended up actually changing the rigor mortis on Jason's body to make it seem like he died at a different point of time, which was absolutely crazy to me. Like, who would know this stuff? But Pip did, and she got it. And it ended up working, and Max Hastings was arrested. But Pip was so scared that something was going to happen that she ends up deciding until the end of his trial she cannot talk to any of her friends or her family, and that her and Ravi have to break up. And I have to say, that was the worst part of this entire series. That was the worst part of this book. That was the worst part of everything, was their breakup. I was sobbing. I was so sad that they broke up. It was absolutely awful, and I hated it. I was so upset. I was like, Pip, what are you doing? You're so silly. But she did it, and they broke up, and I was really disappointed. And the book ends. The book ending is so annoying. The book ends, and I will literally read it for you. 3 minutes after the verdict was read in State of Connecticut versus Max Hastings. Hey, Sarge, remember me. That's what Ravi used to call her. Sarge, because she's, like, very, like, strict and whatever. I want to know if they got back together or not. I want to know what happened. But you don't get to know, because it ends there, and that's it. And I think that's a hate crime. Honestly, I think it's really rude. I need Holly Jackson to call me up right now and tell me what happened. Do they get back together? Do they not get back together? I need to know, because I have had a sleepless night since I read this book. And quite frankly, I'm a little offended. I'm a little hurt. Oh my god. I can't talk. I've been talking too much. But I did end up rating this book still a 5 out of 5 because it was still really good. It was still my favorite. I really loved watching Pip cover up a murder. I thought it was really interesting. And honestly, I read this whole series in like a couple days. The first book took me like 4 or 5 days. The second book took me 2 days, and this book took me 2 days. I flew through these books because they were so interesting. Every single piece that happened, I kept wanting to read more and figure out what was happening. And I did overall rate these books all 5 out of 5s because they were all really, really good. I'm just a little disappointed by the way the series ended, but it's okay. I guess I'll live. The last book in the series is a little novella. This book is called Killjoy, and I rated it a 4 out of 5. That's why I'm rating the whole series a 4. Or 4.5. 4.5 out of 5. Basically, the only reason that this book wasn't a 5 out of 5 for me is because it took place before the events of the first book. Which means that A, Pip didn't know who Ravi was, and B, I'll still never know the ending. But I did really, really like the plot of this book. Basically, the plot of this book is it takes place before any of the other books. And it's basically where Pip's friend Connor is hosting a little murder mystery party. And Pip is one of the people in the murder mystery party and is trying to figure out what happened. It was very cute. It gave me very much, what is the movie called? Knives Out. Knives Out vibes, which Knives Out is one of my favorite movies. So this book I really, really liked. I thought it was really cute. The only reason I didn't give it a 5 is because it took place before, and I really wanted to know what happened. But I did like how this led into the first book, because it kind of ends with Pip getting the idea of figuring out what really happened with Andy and Rob and Sal. And I think it was really interesting. It was a really quick read. I read it in one night. I really did like it. It made me really sad that this was it. This was the end. But overall, I rated that series a 4 out of 5. A 4.5 out of 5. Because it was really good and it was really, really cute. And I did really like the series. I love murder mysteries, mystery books, murder books. They're all my favorite. I have a shelf full of them right there and another shelf full of them right there. They're my favorite. I love them because I just think they're so fun. And I really, really like that series. People have been telling me for months that I needed to read this series, and I finally did. And it was really, really good. So, maybe some people were right. But I would never admit that to their faces. So, anyways, the last book that I have finished this month is Hooked by Emily McIntyre. This was a little dark romance, and it was a Peter Pan retelling, which I love Peter Pan retellings. I think they're so interesting because usually they're done in the style of either Peter Pan is like a bad guy and he's like hot, or it's Captain Hook is a bad guy and he's hot. And oh my god, I love Captain Hook. When I was in middle school, my middle school dance concert that I did, we did Disney theme and I dressed up as Captain Hook. Why? Because I love Captain Hook so much. I'm not talking actual Disney Captain Hook, though. That man is racist. I'm talking Killian Jones from Once Upon a Time. If you know what I'm talking about, you deserve literally everything in this world that's beautiful and amazing, because you are beautiful and amazing. I love that man. So I really love when they do Captain Hook being the good guy, because I love getting to hear Captain Hook. Well, he's not a good guy. He actually is a bad guy. Basically, the plot of this book is Peter Pan's daughter, Wendy, moved to a new town, and basically Peter Pan's like a bad dad. He's really absent. He's like a bad guy. And she meets this guy named Jameson, and they like become a couple, basically. The plot of this book was sort of I'm be honest, I don't really know what the plot is. It was a really good book, and I did like it. I rated it a 3.5 out of 5. The only thing that I really didn't like about it, though, was it was super fast-paced. I mean, this book was at least, I think it was like 200 pages. Let me see. Like 200. It was 300 and 20? 320? 319 pages. And it was super fast-paced. Like, I really didn't understand it. Basically, for the first, like, 4 or 5 plots, they were doing some story building. They were like setting up the characters. Wendy just moved to this new town. She has a younger brother. And her dad's kind of absent. He's like a businessman, so he doesn't really like see them around a lot. But he said since moving to this new town, he's going to be around more. And surprise, surprise, he isn't. So she's a little disappointed about this, but whatever. And she goes to her job and talks to her best friend, and her best friend's like, oh, you should come out clubbing with us. And Wendy, mind you, this girl is 20. I want to point out before I say anything, she is 20 years old. She's like, oh, well, I'm not 21 yet, so I don't think I can go to, like, the clubs. And her friend's like, yeah, but, like, you should just come anyways. And then so her best friend's name is Angie, and one of Angie's friends is like, oh, she wouldn't be able to handle it anyways. And Wendy decides, fuck it, I'm gonna go anyways. And so she goes, and she meets Jameson, and basically they fall in love. And this is all, like, in the first 10 chapters. And then they go on a date, and he takes her back to his house, which is on a boat. And I have to say, though, what I did like about this book, before I get back into the plot, I loved all of the references. There were so many references to the actual plotline of Peter Pan, the movie. Like, there was the Jolly Roger, and there was the fact that he lived on a boat, and there was the fact that he like hated clocks, and there was a crocodile reference, and I loved it. I really did, because I love when they do the little plot lines like that. But back to the plot. He took her to his houseboat, and surprise, surprise, they fucked. Which, like, I'm not gonna go detailing into the smut because I don't want to get demonetized. But, like, I will say the smut in here was pretty good. It was pretty good. The pet names were interesting. He called her Darling, which I did like. He called her one of the pet names I hate the most, which if you want to know what that is, check my Ix video, because I made a video last week about Ix of romance books. But I refuse to say that out loud again, because I can't. If a man ever dared to call me something like that, I honest to God think I would just chop off his dick. But anyways, after that, she, like, falls in love with him, and you find out that he's using her to get back at her dad, because Wendy's dad killed Jameson's parents. And he spent this whole time since he was 18 trying to kill Peter Michaels, who's Peter Pan, because he ended up being raised by his uncle, who, like, physically and sexually abused him his entire childhood. Which, like, I have to say, for this man being this crazy billionaire, like, murderer, bad guy, how is he not going to deal with his own trauma? How is he going to sit here trying to kill somebody and not dealing with his own trauma? Because this entire book, I'm not trauma shaming, but this man was being a crybaby this entire book. He's like, wham, my parents died. Wham, my uncle was bad. Bro, how have you not dealt with your trauma if you're going out trying to kill the man who caused you all this trauma? Like, that was your first fault. But he didn't realize that. And this man, he was a little goofy. I have to say. Because then, his, like, best friend, who, like, saved him from his uncle, named Rue, or Rufus, but they called him Rue, basically ends up getting murdered by Peter. And Jameson was away when this happened because he was helping Wendy with something, and he ends up thinking that Wendy was in cahoots with her dad and made this huge plan. So what does he do? The most rational thing a man can do. He kidnapped her. Which, like, low-key is such a good plot for dark romance books. Like, I love that plot. Don't get me wrong. But he kidnapped her and actually tortured her. Like, he genuinely thought she was doing something bad. Like, this man is a little cuckoo in the head. He was sitting here 5 minutes ago with his fingers inside of her, and now he's kidnapping her. I was a little confused. Like, it jumped so quickly. And mind you, we're still in, like, the first 15, maybe 20 chapters of a 40-chapter book. So it's, like, halfway through the book. And it's all, like, all of this has happened in just the first half. And basically, he ends up, like, kidnapping her and is like, okay, you're going to come with me and we're going to get back at your dad and, like, you're going to listen to me because I'm telling you to. And she's like, well, okay, whatever, I guess I have to because he was threatening her brother. And they, like, her and her dad get into this confrontation and he's like, oh, fuck, I guess she wasn't actually working with him. Which, like, no shit. He jumped to conclusions so fast. He was a little goofy. But anyways, the plot moved along, whatever. She forgives him for kidnapping her, which, like, okay, whatever. And then we're like, yeah, like, I want to be with you, like, because I love you. You've known him for 5 days. I'm dead ass, this book takes place in the course of 5 days. I swear to God. Maybe it takes, like, 2 weeks or whatever. Okay, sorry, something happened in my kitchen. I don't want to talk about it. I'm so sad. Anyways, while I still have a little bit of daylight, I'm going to finish talking. So, basically, like, they've known each other for 4 days. Like, this is a little crazy. But the plot develops, like, I think, like, 1 or 2 more minor things happen. And then, basically, she gets kidnapped again. And he's like, wow, oh my gosh, the love of my life is kidnapped. Like, I need to go save her. And then when he goes there, he finds out that his, like, best man, Smee, tricked him and has been lying to him this whole time, and it's actually his cousin, his uncle's, like, child. And just as he reconnected with his uncle, Jameson killed the uncle, and so he's been, like, fighting with Jameson this entire time, but Jameson had no idea, and it's like, haha, I'm gonna kill you now, and then he's like, haha, I'd like to see you try, and then they threaten Wendy. And Peter is there, her dad, because her dad set this whole thing up because he's an awful person. And then he's like, okay, I'm not letting this happen. So then he kills Smee, and he kills, like, this other guy that was working with Smee. And then he's like, okay, but I still have to kill Jameson. Like, I know you love him, sweetie, but I'm killing him. And then Wendy ends up killing her dad. Which she was, like, violently throwing up and, like, so sad about it. But your dad was literally about to kill you 2 seconds ago. But whatever. You know what? It's okay. It's okay. And then the book ends basically with an epilogue of, like, 2 or 3 years later. Wendy had a baby. She's pregnant with another baby. And they're, like, all happy and stuff. But out of all the romance books I've read, this one wasn't the best. Had some good smut. I'll admit it. Some of it was really good. There were certain things this man said that I would have folded. But it just, like, it didn't hit for me. There were other parts where I was cringing so hard because it was absolutely disgusting. I was like, if a man said that to me, I just couldn't. I wouldn't. But overall, I did really like it, and I liked the plot because I love retellings like this. I will say that I'm probably not going to read the rest of the series just because the next book, I'm not 100% sure, but I feel like the next book is like a replay of The Lion King. I cannot talk today. Oh my god. The Lion King. Which, like, The Lion King. Of all the Disney stories that you could recreate, The Lion King. Interesting. If that's your king, that's your king. It's not mine, though. I'm good, so I don't think I'm going to read it. But, you know, if other people wanted to read it, other people could read it. The last book that I have here is a book that I'm currently reading, which I'm probably going to finish this week, so I'm going to count it. If I don't finish it, I will let you guys know. But it's called The Twin, by one of my favorite authors in the whole wide world, Natasha Preston. This is the last book I have to read before I've read all of her books, and I own all of her books. Over there. I mean, like, all of her, like, The Twin, The Cabin, The Lost, like, those books. I don't have, like, any of her early books, because she started out on Wattpad, and I'm honestly a little scared to read those books. But this is the last, like, one of her more recent books that I need to read. Like, here. It says it on the front. Like, this page. Where is it? Why can I not find it? Hang on. It shows all the books that she's written. Is there, like, a book version of discography? Because that's what it is for music, but I need one for books. All of these books, I have them, and I have read them. This is the last book I have to read of hers. And I'm really excited about it. Basically, it's about these two twin sisters who, their parents got divorced. The mom got one and the dad got one. And the mom died, and so now the twin sisters are back. And the one twin sister who lived with the mom ends up trying to take over the twin sister who lived with the dad's life. Basically, is like the subplot that it says on the back. Here's the book back if you guys want to read it. I haven't read it, so I can't tell you exactly what happened, but I am excited to read this book, and I'm probably going to finish it in like 2 or 3 days, because I love Natasha Preston, and I read her books super quick, because they're really good, they're really fast-paced, I really, really love them. I would recommend them to anybody. Thank you guys so much for watching. It has been so fun to be talking, basically to myself, for the past couple minutes. It has been great. I love hearing myself talk. If you want to hear any more book recommendations or have any more book-related videos, let me know. Write them in the comments. But, yeah, that's it. Make sure you guys subscribe down below. Make sure you guys keep reading. Let me know what you guys read this month. And I will see you guys next time. Bye. Love you all so much.